Because I'm finding when Jesus is in me, there's love comes forth instead of bitterness. Forgiveness springs out, where at times I wouldn't mind even just a little bit of revenge, you know. But forgiveness flows out. Generosity comes through. God gave me a dream a few years ago. He showed me a silver teapot. He knew I grew up drinking tea. I do love tea, you know. And in this teapot, it wasn't pouring out tea, it was pouring out oil. And in my dream, God said to me, if you keep giving, I'll keep filling. Amen. But the moment you get all worried about yourself and your own needs, and you fail to see the needs that I'm presenting you with every day of your life, it'll dry up so quickly. And then a couple of years ago, God woke me up one night and he said, "You're in my way." I said, "Well, what's new? You know, I'm trying not to be. How am I in your way?" God says, "Well, I would like to be seen as far more generous than you are allowing me to be seen." I said, "Well, after I've paid my own bills, I don't know about you, but I commit everything after I've paid my own expenses, because I don't think God wants me to be not paying those. But once I've paid my own expenses, whatever's left over, I commit to God. It's available to him." And I reminded God of this. I don't really think I've got any more to squeeze out. You know, you're taking about 60% of my income now, and I'm giving it willingly. And God must have a great sense of humour. He says, "The problem is you're not thinking big enough. You think I'm limited to your income?" I said, "Oh, okay." This was October 1, so God said to me, "Why don't you set a faith goal by the end of December? How much would you like me to give through you by the end of December?" Think big. I wish I'd been thinking much bigger. And God said, "Set a goal that you know you couldn't possibly reach. So it'll prove to you that if my mind is in you, there won't be any limits." We tend to limit God, don't we? God said, "I want to be seen as the most generous being in the universe, and you're holding me back with your limited vision." I said, "Okay." So God said, "How much would you like me to give through you by the end of the year?" That's 3 months. So I said, "I wish I'd been thinking much bigger." But I plucked a figure out of the air and I said to God, "Well, $50,000 in the next 3 months. That will convince me that I better get out of your way and stop limiting you." He said, "Is that it?" I said, "Well, I wish I'd said a bigger figure, but it's too late. That's my figure." And so I started letting God flow his generosity through me. What a great way to live, by the way. A great way to live. So I'm in Russia with my friend Grant, a Russian guy in Los Angeles. We travel to Russia together. We go to Georgia, Armenia, and Russia usually. And we're in Russia together, and I'm staying in this... Well, actually, no, we were in Armenia, I'm sorry, before we got to Russia. We were in Armenia. I like visiting Armenia because Yerevan, the capital, is only 3 miles away from Mount Ararat. Only problem is you can't get there because the Turkish border's in between. And I stand there with my tongue hanging out, drooling. I want to go to Mount Ararat. I want to climb it and see what's up there. Because you hear all these stories, you know. But, you know, you have to go all the way around through Russia and Turkey, thousands of miles just to get 3 miles away. So I've never actually got there. So we're in Yerevan, and there's this couple in Yerevan that like us to stay with them. They're in their 30s, young couple, with a mother and an 8-year-old son. They live in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. They vacate the bedroom. It's so embarrassing to me. They vacate the bedroom and they all sleep on the floor in the little living area, just so I can actually have a bed. And I told them, like I'm a New Guinea and I've slept on the ground for years. No, you've got to have the bed. And they will sell something just to be able to get food for us. It's really embarrassing. The average person in Yerevan is unemployed. There's a 70% unemployment factor. We think we've got problems. And if you're earning, $40 a month, you're doing extremely well. And you can live on that if you've got somewhere to live. Anyway, we're in this little apartment and these people always insist that we stay with them. They would die if we didn't stay with them. So we stay there. And they treat us like royalty. And I know they've sold some possession just to get food for us. I mean, it's humbling, isn't it? When you are on the receiving end of this kind of love. And the wife is a backslidden Seventh-day Adventist. And her husband is a total unbeliever. Never been a believer. But we stay with this little couple. And anyway, we're staying there, and in the middle of the night, God wakes me up. Because I'd been talking to the husband the night before, and he'd been sharing with me he hasn't had a job for 7 years. And with tears in his eyes, he said to me, a man should be able to support his own family. I said, I understand. And he said, it's just so discouraging. When you're willing to work, you're ready to work, you're strong enough to work, but you just can't find anything to do. And so God woke me up in the middle of the night and said, he's really hurting. I said, yes, he is. Well, God says, remember the old story about if a man is hungry, you can either give him a fish or you can teach him how to fish. So I said to God, what are you saying? Well, God said, well, what's he good at? I said, well, I can't think of anything that he's really good at except driving. He's borrowed a car from a friend, a Russian Lada. We had to push it up every hill. And going up one hill, he opened the trunk, and I couldn't believe it. There's an open plastic container full of gasoline. That's what's powering us. No top on it. It's sloshing around. I said, oh my goodness, I'm riding in a time bomb here. I was horrified. And I said to God, this guy drives extremely well. He's borrowed this car just so he can take us around. So God said to me, well, what about getting him a taxi? I said, well, I don't know whether you can make a living as a taxi driver. There seems to be a good number of taxis around. And just before I'd left the US to go to Russia, somebody had mailed me a check for $7,000. And they had said, we'd like this to be used for some overseas need in one of your journeys. So I had just put it in the bank and left it there, but it was in my mind that I'm going to find an opportunity to use this as I'm travelling. Anyway, so the next day he's driving us around and I start asking him, can you make a living as a taxi driver? I'm just asking very innocently, And how much does it cost to buy a taxi? Because they're bringing in used BMWs from Germany. And they're in fairly good shape, and most of them have only got like 50,000 miles on them, which we would pay a lot of money for here, but over there, he said, oh, well, you can get a good used BMW for approximately $7,000. I said, really? He said, yes. I said, okay. He said, why are you asking? I said, I'm just interested, Anyway, we made a decision to take them out to dinner the next night. They never, not once in their lives, have they ever been in a restaurant. Wow. Not even once. I felt embarrassed again because I took them to a nice Italian restaurant. And for the 5 of us, including the boy, I think the combined bill for a 3-course dinner was about $15 for all 5 of us. It worked out at about $3 each. And we could spend that on one person. in a good restaurant, easily. And I was just realising that I may have made an error in judgment here, because I'm spending $15 on a meal in front of these people, and that's like a month's income for them, you know. So I'm already now regretting the fact that I thought I was helping them, but I may have actually sent them into a little depression here just by taking them out. And we're in this lovely restaurant, and they're feeling very uncomfortable. They've never been in a restaurant before, but she's enjoying it immensely. Anyway, in the middle of dinner, I look at this guy and I said, you know, God woke me up last night to talk about you. He went, he said, about me? I said, yes. He said, your God, whom he doesn't believe in, woke you up to talk about me? I said, yes, he did. We had a conversation about you in the middle of the night. Well, what did he have to say about me? I said, well, he was actually sharing with me how concerned he was for you, that you haven't had a job in 7 years, and how discouraged you are. He was amazed. His eyes opened wide. In fact, God suggested to me that he would like to help you. God has warned me in these matters I am never to take any credit for myself. It's all his initiative. It's his means. It's his thinking that's on the line here. It's God who's in ministry, not me. I'm just a channel for him to do his thing through. You know. I said, God actually suggested he would like to help you. And he's in a state of amazement. He said, well, how does he want to help me? I said, hold on to your seat. He wants to buy you a taxi. I mean, it was like dropping a bomb. I've seen grown men cry, but nothing like this. This guy, and this is in the middle of a restaurant, falls down on his knees and weeps and weeps and weeps. And finally he stopped long enough to say, nobody has ever done anything like this to me in my entire life. I said, well, remember, it's not me. It's him. And he even supplied the means before I left the US. It's sitting in the bank. I'll be wiring it to you next week. And this guy got up off his knees and he went over to his wife and put his arms around her and he said, can you ever forgive me? For all these years you've been trying to get me to pray with you and I've never been willing to do it. I am now willing to pray with you every day of my life. And he began to take that first little step of belief. And what's more, he said with a grin on his face, now that I will actually have a car, I will drive you to church every week. And I might just start coming with you. And they are attending together. Hallelujah. I'm going to go back over there again in a few months, and I'm expecting to, well, I'll be probably preaching in the big church there in Yerevan, and I'm sure they're both going to be sitting there in church together. I'm hoping to baptize him in one of my visits over there. But I mean, this is God at his best. And I just sat there in amazement as I realized that the mind of Jesus was permitting me to share in the generous heart of God. I am experiencing God's generosity at a level that I have never experienced in my whole life. By the way, do you think God fulfilled his end of the deal? Do you think I reached $50,000 in 3 months? Yes. You better believe it. On January, God said, do you have a goal for this new year? I said, no, I can't think big enough. I'm just available for whatever you want to pour out. So I've got an agreement with God. Whenever I'm presented with a legitimate need, I don't get in his way, I meet it. Amen. So that God's joy can be fulfilled in me. How's your faith this morning?